With that down and out of the way, let's now move on to our fourth main topic today. And our fourth main topic today gets sent in to us by Shawn. And Shawn writes, with Dolittle projected to flop hard, do you think we will start to soon hear that the character of Robert Downey Jr., the chatter of Robert Downey Jr., I should say, of Robert Downey Jr. coming back to the MCU? I have spoken. All right. Thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yeah, as we looked on the box office chart, Dolittle, which if you watched the show last week, I gave my review of it. I was not impressed with this movie. I quite frankly, I think it's a very bad movie. It's a movie that tried very hard to be magical and entertaining for the audience. Full credit for the effort. Honestly, full credit for the effort. But it just didn't work. The execution didn't work at all, and it falls on its face, and it's just not a good movie. That's just my opinion. Maybe you feel differently, and that's totally cool. But for me, it just didn't work, unfortunately. The movie made $22 million. Now, for some films, that's wonderful. But for a movie that cost $175 million to make, sorry, a $22 million opening weekend isn't going to cut it. A $22 million opening weekend is just not going to cut it. And with the reviews for Dolittle hovering around like the 19% mark, unlike a Bad Boys, which is hovering around the 75+% mark, you have very disappointing turnout. You have very disappointing reviews. A lot of people aren't happy with the movie. I'm sure there are some people who are, which is the subjectivity of film, and that's great. The question that comes up, though, and the question that we have asked before, and we've raised a couple of times, is how does this, if in any way, influence Robert Downey Jr. and his desire or lack thereof to return or return more quickly to the MCU? That's the question. Now, of course, obviously in Endgame, Tony Stark died, but of course we know this is the Marvel Cinematic fake death universe, so it doesn't really mean anything that Robert Downey Jr.'s character died in the MCU. Nothing at all. We also know that there was a time, not so many years ago, when Robert Downey Jr.'s contract with Marvel expired and it looked like he was going to be done with Iron Man. He was finished with the character. The MCU was going to move on without him. It was all public. Marvel didn't want to pay him the money that he wanted. And then what happened? He did this movie called The Judge, which personally I like. I like The Judge. I think it's pretty good. But it did not do well at the box office. People didn't care and they didn't go to see it. And I do not think it's a coincidence that very, very quickly, after The Judge didn't do all so hot, we heard the official reports that Robert Downey Jr. and Marvel had re-upped and they signed a new deal. Do I personally think that Dolittle doing little, as everybody is punning about it, both with the critic response and obviously at the box office, do I think this will in any way influence Robert Downey Jr. to hasten his return to the MCU, because I believe it's always been the plan for him to come back at some point, or to, if you believe he wasn't going to come back, to now come back to the MCU? And I believe absolutely this is going to have an influence on him. Absolutely this. I think you got to be crazy. I mean, we all have our own subjective opinions. It's all cool. But I'm saying, I think you got to be crazy to not believe for a minute that this first big blockbuster or attempted blockbuster film that Robert has done since Endgame comes out completely flat with the critics and falls flat at the box office, and who knows how much this money's going to end up losing. I always thought this movie was going to lose money, but I said I don't think it's going to flop hard. It may actually flop really hard. I didn't think it would flop hard. I thought it would lose money. I didn't think it would flop hard, though. It may actually flop extremely hard. But I think you got to be a little bit crazy, my friends, my brothers and sisters in film fandom, to not believe for a minute that this event isn't going to influence if Robert Downey Jr. comes back to the MCU or how quickly he comes back to the MCU. Because I believe the answer to that is obviously, absolutely it will. Now, look, to understand my perspective on this, as one individual film fan, you guys know I have always believed that Robert Downey Jr. was going to come back. I've always believed he was going to come back to this role. I said it's not going to be this year. It's not going to be next year. Hell, it may not even be in the next 3 years. But I've always believed Robert Downey Jr. will be back as Tony Stark in some way, shape, or form. Count on it. I just absolutely 100% believe that. I think this just cements that even more. Because look, some people will say, but John, Robert Downey Jr. already has so much money. He doesn't need to come back. And to that, I would say, you're absolutely right. Robert Downey Jr. has all the money in the world. He does not need to come back to the MCU. I 100% agree with that. Robert Downey Jr. does not need to come back to the MCU. But I'll tell you what. Robert Downey Jr. is not just a bank account. Robert Downey Jr. is a human being. He's a performer. He's an actor. He's a professional. And if you don't think there is incredible inherent value to somebody like Robert Downey Jr. and a fulfillment and a joy and a satisfaction that comes to somebody like Robert Downey Jr. who's a performer, if you don't think all that stuff isn't there, for him to be in movies that people love, to play roles that people love, to bring entertainment and to bring in a reaction and to bring in experience to audiences that they then in turn enjoy so much, they heap loads of love upon him and the projects he gets to be in. Of course he does. Every performer would. If you were an actor, wouldn't you love to be a part of something that is universally loved and brings joy and happiness and love to millions, dare I say billions of people around the world? Yeah, listen, Robert Downey Jr. at this point in his career, he's going to get his paychecks, whether he does Iron Man 4 or whether he does Dolittle 2 or whether he does Edwin the Human Fart Machine movie. He can do any of those and he's going to get his paycheck. Believe it. Money's not the issue here. Money's not the issue. For a lot of other actors it would be, but for somebody in Robert Downey Jr.'s particular situation, I don't think it is. But you got to look beyond the bank account and look to him as a person and as an individual and as a human being. And if you don't think Robert Downey Jr. today isn't sitting on his couch, he won't say this publicly, but he's a proud performer. If you don't think Robert Downey Jr. isn't sitting on his couch right now, kind of going in this like, realizing that he's just put out a movie, he's a part of a movie that people didn't like, it's getting bashed by the critics, people aren't coming out to support it, it's going to lose the studio money, that doesn't sit well with Robert Downey Jr., nor should it. It's not sitting well with him. He has become accustomed over the last 10 years of delivering things to audiences that audiences enjoy and love and can celebrate and rally around, and he still wants to be a part of that. And therefore, I think you got to be a little bit crazy not to think that the results right now of a Dolittle aren't impacting the way he's thinking right now when it comes to a possible return or how quickly he returns to the MCU. I still don't think he comes back this year. I still don't think he comes back next year. Maybe not even in the next 3 years, but I believe there's an impact. I believe there's an impact. And so I wanted to know what you guys thought of that. And so I decided to make that the topic of today's question of the day. And our question of the day today is simply just that, guys. It's, with what's going on, do you think the struggles of Dolittle will have an impact or an effect on if and when Robert Downey Jr. makes his return to the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And right now, I put this up just before we started the show. Over 2,600 of you guys have registered your votes already. And right now, the vast majority of you are a little bit crazy. The vast majority of you are disagreeing with me. You guys are saying 67.4% of you guys believe, no, this is not going to have an impact on if or when Robert Downey Jr. comes back to the MCU. That's how you're feeling about it. 32.6% of you guys agree with me on that, believing, yes, it will have some sort of an impact. And I'm going to disagree with you guys on this one. I absolutely believe this is going to have an impact. So, larger question, guys. What do you think about this? Do you think the struggles of Dolittle right now are going to have an impact, or do you think Robert Downey Jr. just doesn't care at this point? Maybe there's an argument to be made for that. Jump down into the comments section below, guys, and let me know your thoughts. All right.